For as long as I can remember, I've always been a fan of video game essays on YouTube. They've always helped tame my restless mind while I game, study, try to fall asleep, or otherwise just relax at home. I've listened to countless hours of video game essays on many games. Some I've played, a countless many more I haven't. I've always enjoyed the perspectives and insights on video games that people have and how their own background, interests and preferences shape the experiences crafted by video game studios. Video games are exactly that, experiences. And I thought I would try my hand on a video game essay on a certain game that I've been playing for the second time. Ghost of Tsushima. Before the video commences, I tend to play games that I like twice, once because I love them and twice to tell you why I do. So please sit back, relax and enjoy this video, and hopefully it can provide you with insights, relaxation or anything else you may seek when you click into my channel. Ghost of Tsushima is one of the most gorgeous games I've ever played. It's a love letter to the Kurosawa samurai moves of the 1960s, which portray a romanticized version of the mythical Japanese warrior castle. In these old samurai movies, you often had a lone swordsman walking into villages and dealing with his own brand of justice at the tip of a katana, much like a rogue gunslinger did with his six-shooter in the Wild West. But unlike those old samurai movies, Ghost of Tsushima takes a more subversive approach to the tale of the honorable samurai. Its protagonist, Jin Sakai, isn't some infallible hero figure. Instead, he's a morally conflicted person struggling to reconcile his ideals of honor and respect with the harsh reality of war. What I love about Tsushima's story is that you have two different conflicts playing out at the same time. First, there's the Mongol invasion of Japan and its crushing effects on the natives of Tsushima. Several factions within the island are forced to put aside their age-old rivalries and unite against this unstoppable alien force. The second conflict is a difference in philosophy between Jin and his uncle, and is the main source of drama for the game's story. Jin's uncle, Shimura, is the feudal lord of Tsushima and an old-school samurai who believes in doing things by the book, true to the ancient code of Bushido. This naive approach often results in defeat, and many lives are lost in the process because the Mongols don't give a damn about honor or respect. In fact, they'd use any cheap trick as long as it meant victory on the battlefield, a strong contrast to the rigid code of the samurai. Jin understands this and adopts increasingly brutal methods to deal with the Mongol problem throughout the course of the game. While underhanded and dishonorable, his tactics are effective and succeed in driving the Mongols back. And thus, the Ghost of Tsushima is born, a legendary figure who gives hope to the helpless residents of Tsushima. Someone who teaches them to break the rules and defend themselves in any way possible. The shogun doesn't like Jin undermining his authority, so he brands the ghost as a traitor and orders Jin's uncle to kill his own nephew. Keep in mind that this is a very condensed summary of the core plot. Apart from his uncle, Jin also has deep relationships with many side characters, who by the end of the game trust him enough to lay down their lives for him on the battlefield. I love how beautiful and surreal the island of Tsushima feels. Its inhabitants are touched by the invasion and all have their own set of reasons to fight and survive. It's unmistakably crafted with special attention to the world and its inhabitants. There is a deeper meaning to everything, a story behind every hut and shrine, which makes the island of Tsushima feel artistically crafted. The developers paid homage to the island's beautiful natural setting with utter respect for Japanese culture, allowing you to respectfully immerse yourself in the tale without feeling like an outsider. It is no wonder then that two of the game's developers were granted the honor of being ambassadors for the real-life island of Tsushima. Not only is this game aesthetically stunning, but it also does justice to the culture and history of Japan. Sure, Ghost of Tsushima isn't 100% historically accurate. The developers took some creative liberties with the depiction of the Mongol invasion, and certain weapons you see in the game, like the hwacha, wouldn't appear until the next century. And I don't care. I can boot up this game and lose myself in a world I know doesn't exist in reality. The island of Tsushima in itself is a dichotomy. It is dangerous but also also beautiful and serene. During many hours of playing, I would slow my horse's gallop to a trot and admire the vistas, the plants, the trees, the natural beauty of the world, and just as I lost myself in the beauty and natural wonder, my eyes would glimpse the rotting corpse of a local hanging from a tree, or pinned to the ground by a spear, just to remind me about the brutal realities of war. Ghost of Tsushima has everything from snow-covered peaks and rolling green hills to fields full of red flowers and cliffsides draped in waterfalls. The game's scenic and artistic beauty is expertly crafted and simply unrivaled. I don't say this lightly, but the visuals are just as beautiful, and at times more so, than even Red Dead Redemption 2, which in itself is a masterpiece. In today's video, I wish to explore the reasons behind this game's critical and commercial success. This will be a full retrospective, breaking down everything that makes Ghost of Tsushima awesome, because it's probably one of the single best action stealth hybrids I've played in the last decade. With Assassin's Creed Shadows set to arrive later this year, I know that people will compare it to Ghost of Tsushima. Personally, I feel Ghost nailed the stealth formula and did it better than any of the recent Assassin's Creed titles. So if you want an Assassin's Creed game set in Japan, don't wait till November. Instead, boot up a copy of Ghost right now. I guarantee Ubisoft's got quite a challenge trying to top it. To understand why Ghost of Tsushima is so good, we'll have to go back a few years in time. Picture this. You're Sucker Punch, one of the most iconic action game developers for the PlayStation. You're known for making a series of best-selling games about a thieving raccoon, and Infamous, a game about a bald psychopath with superpowers. Things are going well through the noughties and early 2010s. In 2011, you release Infamous 2, which is praised by critics and sells over 360,000 copies in its first month in America alone. Then, the 8th console generation arrives in 2013, and you release Infamous Second Son, designed from the ground up to take full advantage of the new hardware. For their next project, Sucker Punch decided to take their sweet time and give the fans something truly special. Over a period of 6 years, between 2014 and 2020, they created a masterpiece that would turn into a cultural icon. Its name was Ghost of Tsushima. Prior to 2020, nobody would have guessed that one day the team behind action fantasies like the wacky Sly Cooper and the superhero-like Infamous would create the most historically accurate and grounded samurai game of all time. Why choose the Kamakura period? Well, it's simple really. Some folks at Sucker Punch were big fans of Kurosawa movies and wanted to make a game set in feudal Japan that captured the same essence of heroism, adventure, and stylish action that Kurosawa put into each of his movies. No big deal, lots of filmmakers and game studios have adopted this concept before, but they always go for the Sengoku or Edo period. We're all familiar with the era of warring states and the following cultural upheaval that took place during the Edo period that led people to the eventual collapse of the shogunate. But few pay attention to the period that came before these two, the Kamakura period, spanning between 1185 and 1333. This was medieval Japan, the age during which the samurai class rose to prominence. Something else also happened during this time, the Mongol invasions of 1274 and 1281. Just like in the game, samurais were Japan's main line of defense against the invading hordes of the Yuan dynasty. And just like the game, the samurai's first encounter with Mongol invaders happened at Tsushima. Since this game is a love letter to samurai movies, it makes perfect sense for it to be set within the Kamakura era, because this was the era in which the samurai truly gained legendary status within the Japanese socio-political hierarchy by proving their warrior spirit against the invading Mongols. It also lays the foundation for an excellent underdog story in which you fight off overwhelming numbers and superior technology with sheer grit and ingenuity. Ninjas, but not really. Next, let's talk about the story and how it ties into the gameplay. I'll start off by admitting that Ghost of Tsushima doesn't have the most complex plot or the most unique themes. However, what it does have is feels. You feel like you are part of this world, and you feel like you're a lone samurai standing up against the might of the Mongol Empire. I caught myself role-playing as Jin while I played, preferring to confront my enemies head-on, with honor, as opposed to stabbing them in the back. I frequently found myself walking in the game, taking my time to really immerse myself in the character I was playing as. It feels like I'm part of this world. Environmental storytelling is a modern buzzword used by YouTube video essayists and game journalists, but in this case it describes Ghost of Tsushima's narrative appeal perfectly. You know how in Dark Souls, the art design and enemies convey a sense of decay and hopelessness that is further amplified through the gameplay aspect of you dying to just about everything with a pulse. Well, in Ghost of Tsushima, the bright and colourful natural surroundings attract you to explore more of its world, and gradually you get the sense that this is a place you want to protect from a horde of soulless invaders who seek to destroy its beauty. That being said, and as I previously explained, it is still an island at war. As you take in and absorb the beautiful sights around you, your attention is also drawn to the corpses and the Mongol patrols strolling around the island, grounding you in the reality of the invasion. A sizable part of the open world aspect of the game is the liberation of camps and towns from the Mongols. It seems to me that before the liberation of any of the points of interest, such as a camp or town, the area with the incumbent Mongol invaders seems to be darker with clouds overhead. When you liberate the town, a cutscene plays where the locals retake the town, and it's always bright and cheerful, contrasting the two warring parties, the Japanese victims and the Mongol aggressors. Engaging with the antagonistic Mongols is also a scenic experience in its own right. Every time you have a standoff in a field full of chest-high grass with the wind blowing against your back and that wonderful ambient music playing in the background, you can feel your heart rate slowing down as tension rises and time warps into an almost stationary phase. Then at a climax, just as you unsheathe your sword to slice an enemy's jugular in a fraction of a second, you feel this burst of excitement and empowerment that is simply unmatched. Ghost of Tsushima isn't a hack and slash like Nioh, nor is it a methodical action game like Dark Souls. Rather, its pacing is geared more towards style, with just the right touch of difficulty to constantly keep you on your toes. I would describe the combat in Ghost of Tsushima as free-flowing, similar to Shadow of Mordor, but with a lot more player involvement. You have your basic light and heavy attacks, along with a block, dodge, and parry. All pretty standard stuff. But what makes Ghost of Tsushima so amazing is the amount of cool movie-like scenes you can pull off with these 5 elements. Once you get the hang of combat, you can make your Ghost of Tsushima playthrough look like a scene from John Wick, but with swords instead of guns. And just for that added touch of awesomeness, I would recommend switching on Kurosawa mode. The game has this incredible risk-reward balance where you can absolutely play it safe and make it past all but the toughest bosses. But if you dare wait until the last moments before a hit connects, you get to pull off perfect parries and perfect dodges, which give your counterattacks a lot more oomph. Then as you unlock new techniques in your skill tree, these counterattacks become even more devastating. If all this sounds amazing, remember that it's just the melee segment of the combat system. There are 3 pillars of combat in Ghost of Tsushima: melee, ranged, and stealth. Melee is done with your katana, which is obviously the most stylish way of fighting, and also the most honorable option. If you're willing to tolerate your own cowardice, you can just hang back and snipe foes with your trusty bow, which comes with an assortment of arrowheads, ranging from standard to explosive. By the way, bows were the weapons preferred by samurais during this time period, so going with the bow is also the more historically correct option if you're into samurai role-playing. Finally, you've got stealth. This is what I like to call ninja mode, because that's essentially what you become. The Ghost is a very different person from the Jin we see at the start of the game. He begrudgingly sets aside his values to strike from the shadows and win victory at any cost. As the Ghost, you rely on weapons like the kunai, black powder bomb, smoke bomb, and sticky bomb. Instead of challenging your enemies to a duel, you sneak behind their backs and assassinate them with frightening efficiency. As the Ghost, you can unlock the full extent of your sensory powers and create a tactical picture of the environment, just like Batman, minus the high-tech spy gadgets. Another thing the Ghost borrows from Batman is his use of fear as a weapon. Every time you unleash your Ghost stance, your enemies will cower in terror, standing motionless for a few seconds while you introduce their Mongol hearts to the cold Japanese steel of your katana. The Ghost mode isn't just for looking cool. Every time you, as the player, make the choice to use your assassination skills or poison darts, you lose some of that honor and respect you once had. It feels like Jin is sacrificing part of his samurai soul, edging closer and closer to the darkness. The Mongols killed Jin on Komoda Beach. All that's left is a demon out for vengeance. In a lot of AAA games, whenever they cut to a cinematic with two characters having an emotional moment, it can be hard to sympathize with them since you don't share their emotions or their history. But in Ghost of Tsushima, you play through Jin's transformation into the ghost rather than being a passive observer. You experience his frustration every time he has to hide in the shadows, every time he has to become someone he hates, because there is no other way to save the lives of the innocent. There are several missions in which stealth is mandatory, missions in which you must assassinate your enemies before they get a chance to ring the alarm, otherwise prisoners being held in the camp might end up dead. In the prologue, when Jin is preparing to assault Kaneda Castle, this is what Yuna tells him.
The walls are too high to climb. We could cause a distraction. Sneak in.
Jin immediately refuses.
No. We walk in the front gate.
Choosing instead to walk through the front gate like the honorable samurai that he is. In the end, he gets tossed by Khotan Khan, falling 50 feet off a bridge into the river. Jin's code of honor and respect had worked perfectly up until this point because he'd never faced a foe much stronger than himself. This is precisely why Jin's flashbacks to his childhood of his uncle training him in the way of the samurai are so potent, because you're tearing those moments down in real time. You're betraying yourself and everything this father figure taught you, and you made those choices with your own two hands holding that controller. This is interactive storytelling, the single biggest strength of video games as a medium. Not flashy big budget cutscenes with B-list Hollywood stars phoning in their performance to get a paycheck. I couldn't care less about any of that stuff. But this is something that moves me and makes a lasting impression. A simple story, well told, will never fail to impress, and Sucker Punch nailed the execution on this one. Before moving on, let me talk briefly about the game's antagonist, Khotan Khan. He's the big Mongolian general and the main bad guy you're supposed to defeat. The grandson of Genghis Khan and the cousin of Kublai Khan, Khotan is a ruthless warrior and views samurai as nothing more than rigid-minded, inflexible fools. Unlike them, he is shrewd and doesn't believe in a fair fight. Everything you need to know about him can be summed up with two scenes. The first one is at the start of the game when the Mongols arrive on Komoda Beach and Shimura sends his strongest warrior, Adachi, to break the enemy's spirit by defeating their strongest warrior. So Adachi walks up and issues his challenge. Out comes Khotan with a glass of wine in his hand, but instead of fighting Adachi, he tosses the wine on him and sets him on fire. Not because Khotan is a coward or a weak fighter, but because he sees no value in fighting Adachi. Khotan will never take a risk if he doesn't have to. When he fought Jin on that bridge, Khotan knew he had the advantage. Jin hadn't recovered from his injuries on the beach and was tired after fighting all those soldiers. He wanted to show Lord Shimura that not even his nephew could beat the mighty Khotan Khan, and it was an intimidation tactic to make Shimura surrender. Khotan often set up barbaric displays of torture and suffering when he wanted, which he demonstrates in this scene, where he forces Ryuzo to light his own countryman on fire in front of the castle gates. And it worked. Khotan took over Shimura Castle without firing a single arrow. Shimura described Khotan as a clever beast, someone who's driven entirely by his own selfish ambitions for wealth and power. Khotan is the perfect antagonist to Jin and is the main driver of his character development from a noble samurai into the ghost. For that reason, I feel Khotan is one of the most underrated video game villains. People think of him as a one-dimensional, mustache-twirling bad guy, but he's so much more. Is it historically accurate? In real life, there was no Khotan Khan, and all 80 Japanese defenders died, along with the deputy governor of Tsushima, Sosakuni. The Mongols took control of Tsushima within a few days and quickly advanced to Iki Island, which also fell into their overwhelming numbers. However, they were quickly defeated at Hakata Bay when they tried to invade the Japanese mainland. By the time they got to the mainland, the Japanese defenders had prepared a large enough contingent of troops to achieve numerical parity. Plus, a horrendous typhoon had destroyed several Mongol ships, so the invaders were forced to retreat back to their homeland. All things considered, Ghost of Tsushima's retelling of the events on Komoda Beach is close enough to reality and makes for a much more interesting story. There are a couple of inaccuracies, like certain armor sets which belong in the Edo period, and the fact that most samurai during this period would be using the tachi rather than the katana. However, these are minor flaws in what is otherwise a masterpiece and a faithful representation of Japanese culture from that time period. If you really want to cosplay as a period-correct samurai, use the bow, because that's what most samurai would have used back then, alongside the Naginata spear. In the visuals department, Ghost of Tsushima scores a perfect 10 out of 10. The helmets, armor sets, weapons, and gadgets are all spot on. The game makes excellent use of ambient effects such as wind, rainfall, and snow to impart a sense of atmosphere and set the mood for epic samurai duels. If you want an old-school samurai movie vibe, definitely turn on Kurosawa mode and use Japanese voices. However, I prefer the rich and vibrant colors on the default mode, which make the flora and the fauna in this game look so much better. The user interface is almost non-existent, in a good way. Directions to waypoints are contextual, as through a quick menu, you are guided by a gust of wind towards your waypoint. There is a variety of different biomes that truly highlight the magnificence of the game. The island of Tsushima is beautifully and meticulously crafted, with waypoints scattered around the map for you to explore and benefit from. Hot springs that boost your health are placed near beautiful vistas to naturally guide you to sites that you should see. I've spent countless hours wandering the countryside of Tsushima, exploring the beaches, the cliffs, the hills, and the plains. Rain, flower petals, and blossoms blow past me as I slash my enemies, spilling their blood onto the pristine wilderness soil. Finally, I'd like to bring up Jin's relationship with the many characters in this game. Old BioWare RPGs like Mass Effect and Dragon Age had companion missions in which you could play through the personal stories of your party members to learn more about their pasts and unlock special companion abilities. Well, Ghost of Tsushima has something similar, and it comes in the form of tales that you can unlock around the map. Every one of your companions, from Lady Masako to Sensei Ishikawa, has a tale with multiple missions that you can complete to get a unique charm, and some of these tell extremely touching stories. My favorite is Yuriko's tale, which is also quite sad. Yuriko is Jin's caretaker and foster mother. While Jin is quite reticent and unwilling to show his true emotions around others, with Yuriko he feels he can be really himself. In one of her side missions, you come to learn more about your family and what type of woman your mother was. Yuriko also teaches you to craft poison and hallucination darts so you can defend yourself from the invaders. In the end, she dies a peaceful death, presumably from her old age. Yuriko was always warm and kind, even as she drew her last breath. Jin's relationship with his father is an interesting one. As a child, Jin saw his father die in front of his eyes, murdered by a group of raiders. Ever since then, he refused to wear his father's armor, haunted by shame and guilt for not being able to help him in that moment. The spirit of Jin's father lives on as the guiding wind. Since the Ghost of Tsushima has no objective markers or minimap, you must use this guiding wind to find locations and collectibles. It's a neat way of integrating a story element into a gameplay mechanic. Tales were definitely a highlight of the side content that was developed for Jin to deeply explore himself and his companions, their history, and their current motivations. Some of the other side content was a bit shallow. I would be moving from one area to the next and would happen upon a Mongol patrol who were terrorizing a native. After a short battle, the victim would reveal a Mongol presence on the map for me to deal with. It almost felt like it was an intended emergency gameplay mechanic, but the repetitiveness of it fell short. I did enjoy finding shrines, however, even though I didn't care too much for the rewards. The exploration gameplay was enough for me to keep searching for the shrines and enjoying the sights they overlook. And with that, we've arrived at the end of my Ghost of Tsushima retrospective critique. Is this game perfect? No, it does have flaws. Some of the side quests can get repetitive, and the skill tree mostly introduces minor upgrades to your basic moves rather than unlocking new playstyles or movesets. But the rest of the game is so beautiful that it makes these shortcomings seem trivial in comparison. If you're looking for a samurai stealth game set in Japan you can pour dozens of hours into, this is it. What's ironic is that Ghost of Tsushima has all the elements of a typical Ubisoft action game giant open world. Skill trees, lots of cinematic cutscenes, a similar realistic art style, collectibles, outposts, etc., yet it plays nothing like a Ubisoft game. Take the stealth for example. Not only are the stealth mechanics deeper than that of recent Assassin's Creed games, but the levels themselves are crafted with stealth in mind. You have plenty of rooftops, chest-high grass, and conveniently placed shadows to sneak through in each mission. Whereas in recent Assassin's Creed games, with the exception of Mirage, you're thrown into what feels like an action game level with no incentive to actually use your stealth skills, since the enemies and obstacles aren't placed in a way that's conducive to stealth gameplay. And you can button mash your way through every encounter. Fortunately, Ghost of Tsushima delivers on that old school Assassin's Creed experience we've been missing since at least a decade. So if you haven't played this game, go ahead and give it a try right now. Before I wrap up, please note that this is my first foray into producing YouTube content. I'm still learning how to make enjoyable content for you guys, and all the opinions expressed in this video are my own, based on my own experience with the game. Please do critique how I can improve my YouTube channel. Tell me what you liked and didn't like about my video, and recommend a game for me to play next. Don't forget to like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you're interested in more game essays and retrospectives like this. I hope to see you all again in my next video. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.